Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. It's Shelley with Spirit of Matter. And this is Saturn Day Mars hour with Mars ruling the ascendant here in the 10th house, 27 Capricorn. And Mars is also ruling Aries. So the moon is right now releasing from replying to Deneb Algedi, and is also releasing from the sextile to Aries in Aries. And so a little bit of honoring Aries before we begin. And so this is first of all a complete lunar cycle from my Aries honey, and I'm going to taste this live with you. So wait, I'll bring it. Okay. So Aries, as we know, yes, not going to show my face right now. Aries, as we know, is ruling the people who are outside of the circle, okay, the people who are not invited to the party, basically. And what she did in response is basically to throw a golden apple at the table and write this to the fairest, or write K with it, something like this. And so this goes in tremendous chaos and eventually caused the Trojan War. So her story was basically she was not included, and then she threw up a big mess in the entire Troy. And Aries archetype is both associated with like narcissism and kind of like picking between people and so on. But it is also important to remember that Aries is the uninvited. Okay, and why was she not invited is usually not mentioned. But the fact is that this was the garden of the gods, and for Aries, she just did not have the decorum. Okay, she did not have the way about society or the blending into society the way other people had. So if you think about it like the analogy of like old money families, then Aries was just not the person that somebody would put in to blend with the people. And because she was not included, it also means that she was cut off from supply. And so it's becoming very relevant because a lot of people, humanity is going to experience the Aries experience, okay, as we let go of the power to the governments and so on and so forth. Then that means our water, our energy, so electricity, but also any sort of energy, our transportation, our banking system, all of these things pretty much collapse one by one. And so this is the Aries experience, okay? A lot of people, for example, now in Israel, if they want to try and travel, then they encounter a lot of violence and the detention at the airport, okay? There is something that we don't know, okay? Whereas if you would have a passport that is not so accepted, yes, like in Arab passports, certain Arab passports, it is not so accepted, then you would be detained, and then a lot of atrocities would happen to the people who are detained from freedom of movement and so on and so forth. That being said, it is not like Jewish people did not experience this throughout history. And also in Israel, if they don't have money, if they don't have, if they went through violence, then they're going through a little bit of an Aries experience. So while the Aries experience is considered narcissistic, sometimes it's important to remember that it's not like people think about a narcissist as a person who causes havoc, causes mess in people, causes confusion in people's lives, chaos, okay? But sometimes it simply is the person who has no other way to get the resources but to cause chaos, because when everybody's fighting everybody, who gets to be understood? Okay. And this sometimes is the marginalized. If I told people, this is a true story, okay? If I would tell people every time I try to work, something happens in peace during peace times, nobody would get it. But after COVID and after the 7th of October, when I say, oh, every time I try to work, something happens, everybody gets me. I don't even have to explain myself because the whole world is experiencing this. Okay, I would experience it personally in my workplaces. And so that is what we want to remember, to see the patterns and to see what needs to change. Okay, we cannot mistreat people, even if they are like detained or refugees or whatnot. We cannot mistreat people in this way. We cannot allow our human rights to be voted out. Okay, and this happens not just when Muslim people come to Europe, because first of all, a lot of them are not into voting democracy out. They're escaping their tribes. But yes, there are also mixed forces, absolutely. But this also happens in a very Western society. Okay, and election design is something that you probably have heard. If not, this is the corruption that is going with elections and election regions and so on. So now for the honoring of Aries and addressing her from when the moon is next to Deneb Algedi, and Deneb Algedi is also protecting of the outcast. It will show you where to steal from, that you will create the least amount of damage and the most amount of good if you are in need and you cannot pay. But it will show you also where to donate your money and to spread your wealth around humanity and support humanity, and also teach you about wealth redistribution. Okay, this is why we say that an Algedi is protector. Yeah, it's not just protector, it's basically showing you where are you on the wealth redistribution chain and what can you do, okay, with your wealth. And so that is the how. It shows you the ways of wealth in a way. So there's a lot more to the Algedi, but in this just honoring, and this is basically sacred honey that I made, and this is something I made for myself, as this is honoring moon on Deneb Algedi with the sextile to Aries in Aries, and had a little bit of this honey and some nettle, dried nettle, turmeric to nourish the soil. Yes, this is not don't look like the honey is inspired like from what I saw in Spirit Sandri, but nothing else is anything similar. Okay, maybe the symbol for Den of Algety, but you understand. So this is completely a me thing. Don't expect, don't take, I'm not a professional like magician. So there's turmeric, there's black pepper, there's nettle, and there is honey, and there's a little bit, let me up jump the aromatherapist who studied according to the British law, and this is a little bit of Tagetes essential oil. And you say, oh, it's not for consumption, blah, 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 blah. I have a whole thing about essential oil. There is a story about essential oil. One person was administered 1 drop of essential oil with a spoonful of vegetable oil. He took 1 spoonful of essential oil, and I do not suggest you to repeat that if you have suicidal ideation. It's not a good, it's poisoning death. Very airy story. It's death by poisoning, and so he died. And this is why in, I think, Britain and some regions, it is not legal to administrate internal consumption of essential oil. Okay, well, they are very potent materia. A couple of drops in a jar of honey is not likely to make problems, but you do have to know what you're working with. The Tagetes oil essentially is aligning between the conflicting element of water and fire. yes, for me, I have natal moon square Aries. So having a moon sextile Aries is something lovely. And the Gettys is more about aligning these elements that seem to threaten each other, because water is evaporated by fire. And this also relates to relationships and intimacy, as I will talk later. But now, ooh, that very first sip. And I have an apple with me. So I can put, oh my God, it smells delicious. Oh my God. So with this also praise to inclusive wealth redistribution, where we can all feel that we are accepted and included, and also get to be autonomous and sovereign. And so with that, I'll add willing consent, of course, and biodiversity, which are values I stand by. And you can watch my previous episode regarding that. So first taste. Wow. Oh, it has cinnamon in it too. Oh my God, it's so delicious. I gotta make another one. Is that a good election? It's a Mars hour. No. And Mars is releasing from the square and is applying to conjunct Pluto. Ah. Wow. It's so good. The taquitos is just so tasty. It's been a whole lunar cycle that I learned from Caitlin. But please, I don't do I don't do the same, so don't think that, you kind of, this is funny. You kind of you want to give credit to people, but you also don't want to put them in trouble, like for them to say later, no, you said that I do this and I don't do this. No, she doesn't do it like that. She just said if you do a talisman or something like this, you put it through a whole lunar cycle to sit, and that's what I did with it. I saw a lot of apples. I want to share with you the apple synchronicity I had today that kind of reminded me. So first of all, there were 3 apples in the fridge. Kind of we have a fridge that where you can put food if you have, and you can take food if you need to. So there were 3 apples, and those were the 3 left. And this is one of them. I say I gotta get one to Aries, and so I'm gonna get more apples to Aries. But today I saw there's a lovely video about an Italian person who's married to an American woman. They live in America, and he talked about the working schedule of an American, and he was laughing about the coffee. He's Italian, okay? I heard that there is this weird rule that until I think 10 or 11, you can drink a cappuccino, but after that you must drink espresso, because if you drink the cappuccino after the 10 or something like that, it's considered not acceptable socially in Italy. I have no idea. It's very strict rules. So yes, so he was laughing about the coffee, and then he said, oh, I have only 1 hour and 45 minutes to drive to work. And then he was saying, oh, at work I have only 5 minutes break, so I order fast food. And then he looks at an apple. He said, oh, apple, how sweet, and he doesn't eat it. And I was like, the uninvited apple. And right after this short, every time I see an apple, I say, oh, that's Aries. And yes, I went and I was like, oh, let's look at the chart. There's a whole lunar cycle for my Aries honey. Just gorgeous. Just like you are. If you know who am I quoting, then you love pasta. So shout out to Italians out there. If you wonder about the end of this episode, we just laughs at the work ethic of Americans who work 14 hours a day and then sleep with their dollars. It's very true. most psychological teachings and relationship teachings that we have is coming from Americans who are trying to restore their relational patterns. So one great thing to Americans, they actually tend to that. But now, as I am celebrating, and one last honoring for this honey. So as I was trying to look for what deity to pay reverence to, that was I said I'm going to do Sekhmet, and the reason is because Sekhmet it was the goddess of both chaos and pandemics, and Aries is associated with poisoning and chaos, and she was very angry at humanity. Aries, same. And so for Sekhmet, you would pray to be saved when there is chaos and pandemics. And my cat, Sekhmet, who came to me right before the war and basically saved my sanity after the war, after the beginning of the war. After the war is manifestation already. So, so I decided to honor Sekhmet, and as I was leaning forward on my table and looking at the cell phone to see if there's like Sekhmet invocation or something like this, then my cat, Aries invocation, then my cat Sekhmet was climbing my back. This was the first time she did that. She was climbing my back. And I'm like, I have a cat on my back. That's very lovely. So yes, this is to gratitude for Sekhmet, and I make sure I bring more apples to my Aries honey. It's so delicious. It's such a beautiful thing. It's Aries dining at the table with her honey. And now for the topic of this episode, which is very much related. And this is the topic of friendship and relationship. And I've noticed that I said something in my previous episode regarding that, and I realized that I wasn't covering the whole truth. And I said something about, well, what we don't like about the person is usually what we don't like about ourselves. And I felt this needs to have more attention because it is very important when we talk about relationships that people are friends with each other. And I think New Moon in Aqua is a lot about this eureka around friendships, okay? And the value of friendships. It's also important to understand that when fire, okay, comes in, when passion comes in, and in romantic relationships, we expect this to come, we expect this to be, then it's a totally different person. Okay, when you have intimate relation with someone, it's a totally different person. It's also triggering different houses. So we talk about more 8th house, 12th house is the bedroom, 8th house, that deep intimacy. And so it's not a casual. So yes, I have moon in Cancer in the 5th. There is no casual sex for me. Yes, but the thing is that it's both important. Yes, absolutely, it's important. I see a lot of the advice like you're supposed to get to know each other. Absolutely, I agree. Absolutely. But you also must remember that you could be dating with someone for however long, and you're good friends and you like each other, and liking each other is really important. But you also must understand that the very things, first of all, that you like are the things that later you're going to can be a problem, because you'll see both the good thing and the bad thing about this. Okay, you take any character trait. Oh, for example, like me, I'm very authentic, I'm very honest, I'm very open, I always talk about things, I am always exposing, yes. But what the dark side, I am a whistleblower. Okay. So I'm not so private. And you know what happened? The polarity would be with people who are extremely private. So I have to tone down my exposure, but I need to learn how to do this and to heal the things that trigger this explosion, both in society and in me. Oh, I see Venus on the 22nd degree today. I should have an ode to the 22nd degree very soon. And she's on the 22nd, so today is compatible to do this. Yeah, very interesting. Okay, so it's the degree of to kill or not to kill, according to Nicolas Stojanovic. So, to kill or be killed, according to Nicolas Stojanovic. To kill or not to kill. So, and so the more complete truth about this, the way I see it, is that yes, we need to get to know people and we need to like each other. Absolutely. At the same time, there's a Zen-like dissonance that we are holding, and this is understanding that what we like about a partner, we will later see that where that can be problematic, and what we dislike about a partner can sometimes turn to be to our advantage. For example, for sure, people that I have exposed a little bit of their corruption, okay, did not like it, but I was also, because I am exposing truth, I would also not blame them for something they didn't do. And I would also expose what they did do good, okay? So I will speak about what I will speak my truth. Yes, and so this becomes a good thing, because now you know there's a person that you can trust, that they will not say you did this or you did that. If you will allow them to speak the truth, they will speak the truth. They will not lie about what you did, and they will not blame you for things for no reason. They would not seek to blame you or to avenge you, but rather to expose and to solve problems. So in the beginning, you abhor this because they expose all your shit. But then you realize that they are not seeking your demise, but actually a solution that is more inclusive, also of you. So, but yes, but I can understand why somebody would not like this about me when they meet me, okay? Or they would very much like this about me, and then they would say, oh, I also, and this is something that we need to remember when we talk about seventh house. The otherness is basically a side of ourselves. Okay, the seventh house is a side of ourselves. It's kind of like a little bit of a shadow, but not an inaccessible one. In every partnership or open enmity of the seventh is showing us that. Okay, this is also how when you look at people who are like enemies to you, I always look at, I learn from them because I humble myself, you know. I could be in their situation. So, for example, when my therapist was suddenly becoming threatening to me, I said, okay, I need to understand this is something inherent to the profession of consulting with people or healing people. And what is the problem here, I must understand. And so it must not be like the only income for a person. That was like my preliminary thought. And so, because he had so many financial worries. It's not something he said, but you know, you feel the energy. When you dream somebody's dreams and stuff like that, you feel the energy. And so I was more trying to see like, okay, how do I learn from this, so that what needs to change so that it would be easier to have healthy relationships also in therapy. I don't know. And so decentralize the power system, not decentralize the people, because he was basically a little bit decentralized by me, not on purpose, because he was stressed and he felt helpless, and that's why he was threatening my life. But the point is not to get, to get the other person. The point is to create a different situation. Okay, and so the otherness here is very important, because when we talk about relationships, not talking about violent relationships, but when we talk about relationships, We are talking about a person that has a side in ourselves that we've sort of allocated for the partner. But when the partner is not acting this out, we can tend to act this out. Okay, and so what we don't like about our partner, not everything, but many things, is something that we have. And this is it's important to understand. It's not all across the board. It's not like people say, the people follow Jung. My darlings, Jung slept with his patient and plagiarized her, and he plagiarized a wrong idea. Okay, she was talking about, she was a survivor of incest, and she was talking about Sabine Spielerein. Okay, she later became a psychoanalyst. A countertransference. Okay, so she believed that she was seductive so much that he responded to it, and of course, Jung adopted the idea of countertransference, and people still use this term today, even though it basically means that in a situation where a patient and a therapist sleep, it is the patient that was the seductive, and the parent was only guilty because he responded to this, because he acted out a response to this. And what's wrong with this is that in many cases is not the same. Just like any other interaction. Um, First of all, you also, if you talk about children, it's of course it's not, yes, but just like any interaction, the therapists themselves usually are the people that try to create this eroticism. And by the way, creating this eroticism is not necessarily a bad thing, because it allows you to expose any latent neurosis around eroticism and um, dynamics, early dynamics to do with sexuality. But because of the setting, it is not giving consolidation to these things, but actually is in the great risk of acting out. And um, because of the unequal power relations, then in many cases, unfortunately, violations of boundaries do happen. And it can be absolutely the therapist that is seductive towards the patient. Okay. And I know this, and I have seen this, and I can literally say it. In my case with my ex-therapist, I had countertransference. Okay, I was eventually responsive, and so I was the patient. And so Jung plagiarized a patient that he slept with, and he took an idea that was coming from an internalization of the blame. And that's not a healthy idea of therapy in general, okay? So if we would learn about it, that's Sabine Spieler-Rein's idea of countertransference, and we would learn that she was a survivor of incest, and we learned that what we know today is not the child seduces the adult, and the adult is powerless against it, okay? For the adult to be powerless against the seduction of the child, there has to be something either in the family, because it is an outer planet to inner planet, okay? So there has to be something to address, and there has to be a place where the parent can address this and not violate the child. And so usually, and it's also not a question of blame or not being strong enough. Seeing it from the point of view of astrology, there is an X such that X is where the Pluto, let's say, of the child is overwhelming for the ascendant, let's say, of the parent, and something like that. And that can be a place that we need to discuss more, so that the parent will have a support system and not act out. So again, releasing the taboo. And that's something I did agree with my therapist. He said, I support in releasing the taboo about those types of attractions in households, and not and having the taboo on the acting out, and not on the whatever comes up within like the parent, but definitely not saying that the child is seductive and the parent is having counter transparence. The child doesn't know what seduction is. It's a child. So so that's something I do, agree with. And so when we talk about relationships with two people, okay, they're supposed to be two equals. There are the things that even though you like a person and you meet them on a friendship basis, when you sleep with someone, they are completely new. And I will say this, okay? I say this, and this one I say not to demote or to put the charges, or not at all. I just say this because it's the truth, because it happened, and because it has a point here in the discourse. Okay, I had astral sex with my therapist, yes, and after this I came to the room, and I remember the first thing I told him. I said, first of all, I told him, you remember these things I told you that I have, like I self pleasure, but like there's another energy. He said, yes. I said, it happened with you. So, and he said, was that a mistake? I said, well, no, it was pleasurable, but we must energy boundaries. Yes, we did not keep energy boundaries. And that was the okay part. Okay, that was not where he risked my life. And so that's just something that happened. There's a patient that's coming to heal from sexual boundary violation, to have a sexuality that I'm okay with, was something that is actually even healing for me at that point, not the setting that could allow for that, to stay healing. But another thing, the next thing I told him, I said, everything is new to me. You are new to me. Okay? And so this is something that we need to remember in relationships, because when you are intimate with someone, they are new to you. You can meet them, you can like them, you can date with them. There is that moment that you are together and they are new to you and you are new to them. It's beyond sexual compatibility. And it's very intimate. And there are things that I still think about. And understand about even people that had conflict with me, that that I can recall something from something that was like you could say an intimate moment, and a thing that I heard in telepathy, like their thoughts or something like this, and I can understand how about things that they later told me, how that relates. Okay, it is that level of intimacy, or you really see into each other's soul. Okay, and again, I'm not talking about casual sex. I'm talking about really meeting each other, and so you cannot expect that when you just date a person and you just care about being friends, that you to say that this is knowing each other like a partnership. And so yes, it is important to make sure you like each other as people, absolutely, but also we are transformed by our intimate relationships. And there's just, I think, looking at our own natal chart and seventh house, eighth house, 12th house. One issue that came up a lot with my ex-psychologist was like the communication, because it was therapy setting. I said, but we must be able to communicate. If you cannot communicate with me, how will we have healthy connection? And so, and the 12th house is what you didn't know that you didn't know. Okay, it is the house of the bedroom, but also jail and hospital. And indeed, he tried to, he not forcibly hospitalized me, but he put psychic attacks so that I will turn to hospital. And later I nearly died from the pills. And this is how I changed my whole outlook, because I saw, what helps me is validation, housing, having a place to be, um, yes, autonomy, sovereignty, those things, they help, yes. And when I have those things, even when I had sex with my therapist, as long as it was both in this, that was not an issue, uh, even though he was, yes, but when I don't have this, and somebody's threatening to take my sanity, my credibility, and my this and my da, 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 then yes, it's not even because you are my therapist. It's because you did this. Okay, so what went wrong was not because he was my therapist, but because he acted out these things. Of course, there is a structural setting that I don't ignore. And no, this is not a prescription to sleep with your patient, you must understand, yes? But we also need to change the power relations in the medical world, and this is becoming incredibly relevant. So energy changes in the medical world. And I seen this the very first time that I was having astral sex with my psychologist. I told him, I think we come to change something in the medical world, and the power relation in the medical world. And that's what I said. So this is the meaning, the purpose of our encounter. Before that, in academia, the purpose of the encounter has something to do with an earthquake, and we live in earthquakes and world wars, so and nuclear stuff. So I didn't understand why I see things to do with the war. I also saw this like later with my psychotherapist. Not psychotherapist, he's a psychologist, yes, with all the degrees and something. So it's not that he's not well trained, he's well trained to do this. So and his income depends on this. Okay, it's not something you find out as a first degree student for psychology. Sometimes you do, I don't know, depending on that. And of course, to graduate in academia, to be a part of like, to get to PhD and stuff like that, is nearly impossible if you're not a member of some secret society, especially for men. Okay, women are usually abused and exploited anyway. So it is true. Yes, I talked about it in my previous episode. Melva, I don't remember the last name. She was a student of Oppenheimer, and what she liked about him, she said, he's the only man that treated me as an equal. Okay, he was developer of an A bomb, and she was helping in the studies, and she had her own insight. So she's also one of our atomic mothers through the theory. Mother of A bomb, literally. But she went to education because she didn't. And so, yes. By the way, if you want to talk about politics in academia, then the person who unfortunately was violating my boundaries in academia, he had a joke that was running, not his, of someone who was a dean or someone of some Ivy League school, and that person later went to be a president. I don't remember which president. And they asked him, why did you leave the academia? He said, well, you know, that I couldn't stand the politics. So this is a true story. It's a joke that was real. So yes, this is yeah, academia. So you understand that the politics in academia are big. And when I was going to therapy, actually after the Me Too, I was thinking like, okay, there is the issue between a teaching assistant and a professor, doctor, and there is the issue of projections and the issue of transferences. So maybe if I go to therapy, and maybe if we find a way to treat that, so we have psychologists that can treat that instead of like being Me Too cases. I was looking for solutions. Boy, was I naive. So, about what's on, and that's I discussed in another video. Okay, so yes, I have Pluto associated with the ruler of the seventh. You're not going to be involving deep psychology for everyone. But I just wanted to mention this, that yes, we need to like each other, but also we need to take into account that when we do meet each other intimately, we meet our ancestral lineage. This is 8th house. When we think about having a family together, then we meet our ancestral lineages, the 4th house related, okay? And the 12th house, we also meet other worlds. And if there's scientific innovation, if there's societal innovation, especially when there are outer planets involved. But 12th house is a house of channeling. Yes, it's the bedroom. So mediumship. They can be even blending in. Okay. There are great stories, not only terrible stories, there are great stories where people, a couple, and he's at work and she's in another place, and suddenly she feels orgasmic. And she's feeling her partner's arousal. These things happen between people that genuinely have these close connections. I cannot tell you what the placements. You can look it up. It can be a wonderful topic of discussion. It can be a wonderful topic to address. You see the moon on the Balgadi with this Aries. It's just lovely time to talk about this. And so those having this in mind, and I think looking at our own charts, looking at your own chart before you had these encounters can give you an idea. But yes, look into your own chart when you have these encounters is so important. Is so important because it reduces so much the blame that couples have towards both themselves and the other. Okay. And yes, we need the housing distribution that to allow this open dialogue in Finland, where they also have housing first. This is where a person who's dealing with what they call psychosis, they will have the independent housing, and they would be supported within the community, and they would be listened to, and they would be believed. And so they found out that most of what we call psychosis is people went through violence, always exposed to violence. And I have an additional thing to say, is people see also, the 12th house is the bedroom. People that had sexual violence, they encountered that. But the 12th house is also where we're exposed to kind of like the entire humanity, and the children can see things to do with that. Also, when a child self-pleasures, they can have insights to the world and see things in the world. It's just it's just the way our senses work, and sometimes you don't know if it is you, if this life, other life, and so on and so forth. Before the war, my psychologist said, I see murderous things, and I don't know if it is from your life or from my life. Okay. But then I think he would kind of like transform into various figures, more like a channeling, and that would affect his energy very deeply. So if he was like an offender at that moment, then he would see things from experience things from the perspective of the offender, but unfortunately also act out. And so that was, yes, a part of the dissonance. And people, for example, if we're looking for missing people, if we're looking for people that were abducted, what people won't believe, then at the 12th house, people can be exposed to these stories. Now I have Pluto in the 12th. And it's important to understand that, first of all, when we meet a speaker, they need to have housing, they need to have ground, they need to have validation. However crazy something that someone says, if you look at the patterns, you will always find a story. And I can say after the Me Too, I had basically 3 women filing charges for me against me because I spoke up, basically. They did not like to be added into the satire. And so it was a whole story. I wrote something like, "Oh, what are you waiting for someone to commit suicide? Come on, will you change things?" And then they thought, I want to commit suicide. And I just called the police on me. They said, the police, okay, come, let's go. Let's go. Let's just see what damage to you. Let's go to the hospital. Okay, no problem. And so I was at the hospital, and then I speak with people. One of these people was seeing things and seeing a lot of them. And he saw a lot of the things that we are experiencing now, by the way. And so even one of the nurses says he's very sensitive to frequency. I asked him, do the pills help? He said, a little bit, but then I go up again, and he mentioned something that I will not disclose that had to do with violence, also in the medical related. So he was not saved from being kidnapped, okay? Or being violated in that way. And that is what I understand from this story. And this is why he could not get to ground. He could not be present in the body because the grounding, for grounding is difficult. And I had difficulty grounding, and I saw wars. And then a mother of one of the patients told me, no, ignore that. I said, how can I ignore that? I said, I tried to ground. And there were veterans with me, also hospitalized. I would see their things. And so what they would see, okay. And I think that what was the problem with the veterans is not the post-trauma, but because they were seeing this happening again, and this is why they went crazy. Like, what can I do? But it was flashbacks, but no, it was things that you see that are happening in the world and will happen as the war. So when the war broke out, you can understand. And so I think a lot of our generation, my generation, some people, in older generation, like, oh, you guys are so spoiled, you grew up to such abundance, and so on and so forth. And it's like, yes, but we are the first generation. And so, yeah. This is also just something to consider, that even what we think is the most difficult psychiatric situation, which is psychosis, when people have housing, food, validation, the stories start to make sense. And when they can speak and be listened to and be accepted and know that they are loved, I don't mean like romantically, I mean like they are loved for who they are, and that they are as deserving as anyone. Then they don't have psychosis, or even if they are in good environment, not only they don't have psychosis, but what they have is good channeling, like the voices become not intruding, but actually supportive. And so definitely the open dialogue, but must be practiced with housing first. Yes, in Israel they tried to do this without housing first. It created satire. It created people that were forced to take beta blockers in a place that they were not houses, something with places that was supposed to replace hospitalizations. Like, it is satirical. It is not open dialogue in any way, shape, and form. And when I contacted them, they said, well, we try to go to be normalized, like in the healthcare. But if you want to create something different, then you're welcome. The problem is the budget for housing. Yes, but it's important to understand open dialogue is only coming with housing first, and with a culture of accepting people. So the person, you cannot put person in a community where the community cannot accept that this person, yes, they were violated by the people that you admire, by the people that you are, maybe some of you are eroticizing on. Okay? This was also a problem for me in academia as an older person. Okay, it was a person that was, that I did not get along with, like, on that level. Was a person that a lot of people admired, and so it's difficult for them But when it was a person that they were not that much sexually into, they had no problem believing. Okay, and this must be discussed too. Okay, these double standards that we set to men. Okay, willing consent is always important, not just when you don't have attraction. It's always important, and so. And yes, there are the complications of the energy needs to match, the person needs to match, the action needs to match, the word needs to match the action, and reading faces. And to do this, you have to be able to read your own feelings, but also the moons need to meet in a certain way, and we need to be visible to each other, okay, in a certain way. And so this is also something that has to be there. It is very frightening when it isn't, because sexual boundary violation is basically like decentralizing a person, and that is, to decentralize a system is good for humanity, but to decentralize a person, they become like a system that works against themselves and work against you. Okay, so we begin to undermine ourselves in this way, and we don't have self-trust because we don't have ourselves. So that was something that happened to a person with me in 2007. He didn't get that he was violating my boundaries. I didn't get this because before that I thought I was attracted to him, maybe. I don't know. But he violated my boundaries. I didn't understand what was wrong. And then I saw that I'm beginning to be decentralized, I'm beginning to be moody. And he asked me if I was raped. And so I told him, no, I told him, you raped me. And that was a bad moment for both of us. But he didn't get it. What he did was not like confusing me or misleading me about his intentions and this, but it was violating my sexual boundaries. And that's why I responded the way that I responded. And I'm also sensitive to energy. So it's really, really, I felt it like a psychic attack, but it was a mixture of like euphoria and dysphoria. And I was like, what's wrong with this? Why? Maybe it's something missing. And I said, well, the love. He said, how did you see it in my eyes? I said, no, you don't love me. You told me, like, I wasn't expecting. I was like, I don't like your character. Okay, so it became like a really a satirical moment, but I spent almost 2 decades trying to recover from just that, and then to think what it triggered in my childhood. That I even came to this situation to begin with. I was not present enough in my body. I did not have a connection with my emotions. I did not have connection with my sexuality even. I was sure I have connection with my sexuality, bogus. And there were many things that were not there to begin with. And so it's kind of like 2 wrongs don't make it right. Yes. And so this is another important thing to emphasize on, and that is willing consent. Well, it's about learning to be in our body, but this is a process for us as humanity. Okay. And this is so important that if you think about the moon and a lunatic, but eventually our emotions, they have reasoning, they have patterns, whether it's from childhood, or whether it's something that's happening now, whether it's something happening in the world. And even those we think are lunatic, when they get ground, okay, when they get soil, when they get housing. This is why Israel, if you ask me, I think all people need to have housing. All people, but also within the country, all people need to have housing. All people need to have land. When you say we'll evacuate this land from those people, either way, doesn't matter which people, this is problem, because everybody needs to have autonomy. And this is something that's important. That's your soil. And also people need connection with the soil, because in the city you live in a 1-room apartment. I began to walk barefoot on the ground in a hospital, okay? Then I began to do it in the yard. And then now there is a yard where I live that I can grow things. I don't own the. I don't own like yes, but it's advancing towards that. Um, and so this is highly important, because how can a person who's living in Tel Aviv understand what is these people are fighting over a piece of land? You know how many times I heard this in my family. Why are people fighting over a piece of land? Okay, because they didn't grow. If I am not lying on the soil, okay, and working in the soil and looking at the stars and planting and so on, then I'm more agitated. My nervous system is not balanced. And I become a horror of a human being to be around, to be frank. You know? And so, but when you are like that and you say, oh, now you understand, oh, now I get what olive oils, what olive trees. It's like, what olive trees? No? If people don't have that, they can't relate to that dream that you are missing, you've been deprived of. They never had that. They never had the olive trees. They don't know what you're talking about. And also to appreciate our lives. Like I saw a video of a family from Gaza that was the house was evacuated. The house was bombed. Okay, they had a house. It's something that we don't know. I mean, in a family we did own, but later we didn't, and so they missed the simple life. Okay, they had their trees there, their crops, their this, and they said, before this life, we thought life was boring, but now I miss this boring life, and my heart went out to them. It was nothing political; it's just life. It's just life, and so also people that do have this, they have less hatred. They don't have time for hatred. They look at they tend to the trees, they tend to the cats, but the only thing they can have is like I saw a person from South America, South USA, and he said on the demonstration, or the big demonstration of the Palestinians and so on, it's not the Palestinians. Please, it's not the Palestinians. Some Palestinians, some are not Palestinians. And the really Palestinians, we don't hear them because they're oppressed by their own regime, and they have the occupation. Okay, so some of this, it says not occupation, it's 67 borders, it's 48 borders, it's these borders. Yes, of course, if you get into Gaza now, it's you occupy the place, and so unless it would be returned in some way. But yes, but the thing is that there was the southern man, Southern American, watching this, and he said, I just see people, masses of people, raising a flag that is not the American flag, going, woo, woo, woo. I get scared. Don't come with this to the South. You get with this to the South. This scares us, people. This scares us, white folks. We see that. We say, we should, boom, we shoot you. Okay? And then he said, like with a toy gun, so that nobody would accuse him of anything. But this is the only problem, like with people that have their land, if they don't travel. So we need to both have our land, but also to travel, so we're exposed to other cultures. Because then something new comes in and you're like, you just shoot it. Okay, they want to occupy us. That's what you feel. I think this is true also in this case. Yes. But if Munden is also those who are uninvited to have freedom of movement, to not be detained at the airport, but also to not vote out democracy, and and to have land, to have connection with the nature, to have autonomy and sovereignty. And this is also where the relation to the inclusivity for all of us is important. It is impossible that a person cannot be acknowledged for their gender unless it goes through a Catholic wedding with the medical system. Okay, some people need gender affirming. Yes, and I talked previously about investing in the rare cases. because you can be all genders without having a gender affirming surgery. Okay, the whole issue about gender is that this is not your sex. Capiche? So just the whole thing about gender, or what happens when people are satisfied with a gender affirming situation is they have, they say gender dysphoria. I think it's not the correct term because sex is not gender, but they have a dysphoria about the body, that they know that they were supposed to be having this body and not that body, and when they have this body, when they shapeshift, so basically, then they are happy with that. These are rare cases. Not every person who is more than one gender or has the other gender needs to go through a surgery. Okay, I can be a man, I can be a woman, I am a woman, I am also a man. I don't hate my body, I love my body, I am grateful for my body, I am tending and caring for me. If I can see that I don't know, I gained too much weight, I look at the issue holistically and not blame myself like I'm the problem for that. And it's nothing to do with any surgery. Yes, my autonomy, my I am, is in my sovereignty, not in the hands of other people. That being said, there are the cases where people do need gender affirming surgeries. If we invest in the rare cases, we wouldn't have that to become a pandemic for a person to get healing and to get their surgeries. For that, we must include that in our budgeting. We must be inclusive of the rare diseases. Okay? And also to understand that the case, there's the exception, supposedly the uninvited or the exclusion, they offer something new to humanity. Some of it is them becoming and perhaps closer to society when they are included, and some of this is societal changes that do need to happen. So to have this respect for the innovators, or people say the outcasts, or it's not, they don't have to be outcasts, that's the point. The issue of having housing for every person is not about being, brainwashed communist or something. Like, I'm not a communist at all. Okay, the kibbutz breeded a lot of sexual boundary violation against children, kidnapping of children and stuff like that. I don't think the kibbutz is the correct idea in praxis. I do think that we need to preserve autonomy when we are inclusive. That's the point of being inclusive. Everybody is the same. We don't have inclusivity and we don't have community, because community cannot exist without people. The melting pot experiment of Ben Gurion, we know, have breeded a lot of problems. And this, to create the Israeli, is kind of like to create the Übermensch. And I guess it's also why Zionists are accused of, well, there's a lot of things going on. There's nothing to do with the state of Israel, but actually it's something global. Like, they were castrating the crazy in Finland and in Sweden, and they are doing that in Israel too, and worldwide. And they treated the people who are not like the what they want to breed. So this is not a Zionist problem, but unfortunately, Zionism did not manage so far to present an alternative to this, and I think a lot of the dogmas need to be revisited. Okay, the kibbutz breeds sexually abused children that are sex trafficked and take decades to recover. We need to change that. The melting pot breeded people who have lost their identity and were not feeling included. Okay, for an Ethiopian woman to change her name to Sarah, and not a name that is difficult for us to pronounce, is both depriving us of the cultural richness of Ethiopian people and Ethiopian heritage and society, and deprives her of her identity that she came in with and her sovereignty. And so this is important, okay? And so the melting pot was not a good idea. It's just taking, melting the identities of people to form the union of the nation state was not. And I think Israel is dealing with a little bit of the karma, not in the karma in the sense of like, bad luck or bad. No, it's in the sense of those were the things that were done. Those were the results. Those are not good results. Let's change that. As half Dutch, of course, I'm biased towards being a citizen of the world. Now that is a bit taken away from me, both because I was homeless in Netherlands and the bureaucracy around. We're supposed to have cancellation of fines of public transportation. I didn't get to the people, and the person that tried to that could maybe help was saying something that, at least from my point of view, a survivor of attempts to human trafficking, was triggering. So I understood I don't want my rights to be violated, and I didn't go there. But that also means that I didn't pay, that I have some fines that I didn't take care of. So this is paper-wise, but other than that, the idea that people start talking about the values of family while thinking to annex a part of Belgium, which means war, which is damaging to the family, to the birthing conception, to the willing consent, to the ability of people to be a part of society. And this just breeds war, okay? And so you cannot vote out democracy is something that should be legislated. You cannot vote out democracy. You cannot just have like, oh, if the majority agrees that we have Sharia laws, this is not in this country. You want to go by your religion, do it in your own. When I heard my first Sunday Mass, it was in the Oranjekerk, in the Pipe in Amsterdam. And that was on a Sunday, of course. That's usually how it goes. And what was beautiful about this, they had the pride flag, they had the symbols of all three religions hanging at the entrance to the church. And that, if I put my money on the plate, this is the plate that I put it on. And this to me matters more than it's the cultural diversity and the acceptance and inclusivity here that is very important. And also what I like about people call it paganism, but paganism is actually a bad word from the vantage point of monotheism, and that is that pre-Abrahamic religions, they celebrate nature and they celebrate life. Of course, this was not always true. Children were sacrificed, also in Norse tribal societies. But the notion of celebrating life is important. The only reason that people are shaming suicidal people is that somewhere along history, and this is something I learned from Alvarez's book, and somewhere along history, people were Christian and they were messianic, something like that. And they believed that when they will die, this is like heaven. So they were so much infused with this idea that they were taking people and say, either you murder me, or if you don't murder me, then I go to heaven. I murder you, because then you go to heaven, right? Yes. It's good for the Lord. If everybody dies, it's good for the Lord. I can understand how that can be used for depopulation. And so eventually this was no longer the case, that they wanted to depopulate. And so the church said that suicide is murder, and because then it was. Okay, so suicide is murder, and it was abolished. and it was only then that it was abolished. Okay, what has that to do with a person who is dealing with wanting to live, not finding a way to live, and saying, well, at least give me death with dignity? Okay, it's nothing. But also you must understand that the people who are suicidal, at the point of where they do that, there's always the calling for help that nobody eventually gets to, and then they die. It's because people want to live, just need to be more inclusive and allow them to live rather than shaming people when they are having struggle. And with this, I'll end.